PETA deserves their failure. This sounds way better.
PETA has built its reputation on protecting animals from harm. They call themselves the largest animal liberation organization in the world. But what most people don't know is that the way they liberate animals is by killing them. From employees dumping animal remains in random city dumpsters to stealing children's pets and euthanizing them, PETA starts to look more like a house rather than a sanctuary. And on top of that, they have built an entire brand around shocking the public with their sensationalized advertisements, comparing factory farming to slavery, animal agriculture to the Holocaust, and routinely creating campaigns so extreme that even fellow vegans and animal rights activists have a hard time supporting them. PETA's desperation for attention has gotten so bad that they even resort to calling out video games for their portrayal of animals when they literally couldn't be any more harmless. And for a company that's called People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, what they actually do to them will horrify
Stealing a kid's pet is crazy.
You. In June of 2005, a troubling discovery was made behind a local grocery store in North Carolina. Employees reported that every Wednesday they would discover the remains of countless dead animals inside the dumpster behind the store. The authorities were contacted and an investigation took place. Officers took note of 2 PETA employees unloading black trash bags full of animal remains into the dumpster. The police intervened and discovered 18 animal carcasses in the dumpster and another 13 inside of the van. Adria Hinkle and Andrew Cook were arrested and faced 31 total felony charges for animal cruelty, as well as 8 misdemeanor charges for improper disposal of dead animals. PETA CEO and co-founder Ingrid Newkirk claimed that the 2 employees were tasked with bringing the animals to PETA headquarters to be euthanized, although could not clarify why they had been dropping off the remains in the dumpster.
Why are they euthanizing them? Why would PETA, the organization, totally meant on... Wait, Leo, you're asking for bacon? Sora, I'm not interested.
The 2 managed to avoid jail time. They were cleared of the felony charges of animal cruelty and
Leo, you want
forced to pay
bacon?
a small fine for littering. That's right, littering. But it didn't really matter what the courts decided, because for many, this was a chilling revelation that couldn't be ignored. The country's most notorious animal rights organization was animals. But how could this be? Well, it turns out that it was always a core part of their ideology. The unfortunate news is that this video is heavily censored to abide by YouTube's community guidelines. This content is by no means meant to glorify the subject matter, but rather to document and educate. However, if you'd like to watch the fully uncensored and ad-free version of this video, as well as all of my future uploads, you can do so on my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. And as always, thanks for the support. In 1972, Ingrid Newkirk was a meat-eating college student living in Poolesville, Maryland. After her next-door neighbor suddenly moved out, a dozen cats were left behind. They found solace in her backyard and began reproducing at a rapid rate. Overwhelmed by the responsibility, Ingrid took the strays to a nearby animal shelter in hopes of finding them permanent homes. But when she found out that the shelter had euthanized all of the strays she brought in, she snapped. This was the moment that Ingrid Newkirk was radicalized, and she began her crusade against animal cruelty. She began working at the very same shelter in hopes of making a difference in protecting the animals. However, she became witness to unspeakable acts of abuse from other staff members, to the point where she felt that the employees took pleasure in the animals. She said, "In the end, I would go to work early before anyone got there, and I would just kill the animals myself, because I couldn't stand to let them go through that. I must have killed 1,000 of them, sometimes dozens every day." Now, this quote by itself sounds insane, but many people support Ingrid in this situation because euthanizing these animals saved them from suffering the abuse of potentially sadistic humans. This logic would become ingrained in the foundation of PETA, but it introduces a difficult ethical dilemma, and that's that PETA feels like they get to decide whether or not another living creature's life is worth preserving. In 2024, PETA took in 3,317 animals and euthanized 2,230.
That is so little.
In 2025, they took in 2,854.
They barely, all they're doing is kidnapping little. So they're just murdering 2,000 dogs a year, bro?
1,684. Approximately 2 out of every 3 animals taken in by PETA during this time were killed. while the national average for other shelters remains at only 8%. This is a massive outlier. On the surface, it almost seems like PETA is eager to kill these animals, while the average shelter is more committed to prolonging their animals' lives and eventually finding them homes. PETA operates what it describes as a shelter of last resort. Many no-kill shelters will reject taking in animals with their limited admission policies. Sometimes it's because the facility doesn't have enough space to keep the animals, other times they simply refuse the strays because of their low chances for adoption. As a result, limited admission facilities will always maintain a low kill rate and high replacement rate. PETA takes in every single animal that is brought to them, regardless of their health, age, or adoptability, leading to far higher death rates and sparse adoption numbers. This issue becomes even more complicated when you consider just how many strays live in America and how finding all of them homes is quite literally impossible. It's estimated that the number of feral cats in the United States is in the tens of millions, and they are all reproducing at a rapid rate. Estimates say that a single cat and her offspring could spawn 370,000 cats in just 7 years.
Oh my
Millions
God.
of strays are taken in by shelters every single year, and even the most generous adoption rates still see hundreds of thousands of animals without homes. Some of them are just too old, sick, injured, or feral to be domesticated, meaning that if they don't die on the streets, they'll live the rest of their lives suffering inside of a cage, which is why many, especially PETA, look at euthanasia as the only viable option. PETA also frequently refers to animals as if they are equivalent to humans. They use terms like speciesism and human supremacy to criticize others that believe that
Well, we are superior.
humans are inherently more valuable than other forms of life, which sounds like what you'd expect from an animal rights activist until you remember how many animals they kill. Critics argue that's like the nation's largest nursing home claiming to value elderly people above all else while routinely deciding which residents would be better off dead because their remaining years might involve suffering. Most people would find that logic horrifying. Even if the intentions were compassionate, they'd still question whether any organization should have that much authority over who gets a chance to keep living and who doesn't. And as a result, PETA has also found themselves in controversy for being a bit too eager to get rid of animals, like in the case of Maya the Chihuahua in 2014. After receiving a call to gather feral dogs and cats in a local trailer park in McCormick County, Virginia, 2 PETA employees found an unattended Chihuahua named Maya.
I'll be back, guys.
The
Going to the
workers
bathroom,
collected the dog,
but I'm gonna watch it on my
believing was a
phone.
stray, and euthanized her later that day. In actuality, the dog belonged to a 9-year-old girl who had received Maya as a Christmas present. To make matters worse, the employees had not followed PETA's standard operating procedures where they are supposed to wait 5 days after capture to euthanize, which ultimately resulted in a $49,000 settlement to be paid out to the family. But the situation leaves you to wonder, how many times has this happened and gone unnoticed? How many families are under the belief that their pet ran away from home when in actuality they were abducted and killed by PETA without a chance to return? In 2008, the Center of Consumer Freedom petitioned Virginia's Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services to reclassify PETA to a slaughterhouse. Their petition cited PETA's 2006 adoption numbers, which showed that they only had managed to find homes for 12 out of the 3,061 animals they had taken in. The rest were unfortunately euthanized, meaning that animals taken in by PETA had a less than 3% survival rate. It is absurd to classify PETA as a humane society when its employees are slaughtering nearly every companion animal they bring in. PETA has killed over 17,000 pets since 1998. Given the group's astonishing habit of killing adoptable dogs and cats with such ruthless efficiency, it's only fair that the state of Virginia refer to PETA as a slaughterhouse. Now, to be fair, most people can understand that animal shelters are forced to make difficult moral decisions every day, but PETA makes it incredibly hard to give them the benefit of the doubt when so much of their public image is built around provoking outrage, which goes all the way back to the early 90s when they collaborated with country singer-songwriter Katie Lang to create their Meat Stinks campaign.
Hi, I'm Katie Lang, and this is Lulu. We're with the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. We all love animals, but why do we call some pets and some dinner? Meat stinks, and not just for the animals, but for human health and the environment.
This became particularly controversial as Lang was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which had a vibrant cattle ranching industry. She was banned from 30 local radio stations, and a sign in her hometown identifying it as the home of Katie Lang was burned to the ground. Just in case you thought that Canadians were nice. Drink water. She was also disavowed by a handful of local public officials. Alberta's Minister of Agriculture said, "It is extremely unfortunate that she has decided to side with the animal rightists. this, there's a certain feeling of betrayal. We have supported KD fairly well in Alberta. That being said, the publicity also brought KD massive success and attention to new fans that helped her album achieve gold status. It was here that PETA likely realized that controversy and negative press had a decent amount of benefits, and moving forward, causing outrage was their main strategy. One of their first major successes in this tactic was the "I'd rather go naked than wear fur" campaign. Originally, it involved two PETA staff members, Dan Matthews and Julia Sloan, walking outside of a fur expo in Tokyo, Japan fully nude. This campaign later expanded to include major celebrities like Pamela Anderson and Dennis Rodman. The campaign became so popular that it spread far beyond animal rights activists, and celebrities publicly supporting it turned the campaign into a mainstream pop culture moment, to the point where it became kind of taboo to wear real fur. This brought more attention to PETA and increased awareness to animal rights overall. And from there, PETA's strategy
give me a fur coat, bro. This shit's go hard.
Only became more aggressive, intentionally creating offensive messaging to make headlines. In the late 90s, PETA set its sight on McDonald's, advertising unhappy meals and calling the restaurant chain McCruelty. Activists would stand outside McDonald's locations handing out fake
We're fucking losers.
Happy Meal boxes redesigned to look almost identical to the real thing, but the packaging featured illustrations of an evil Ronald McDonald holding a knife surrounded by blood splatters to make him look more like a murderer. The goal was to hijack one of the most recognizable brands in the world and force customers to associate a trip to McDonald's with—
if I was a kid in the 90s and I found that, I would take them as like a collector's item. I would think it's a funny meme.
The realities of factory farming, and their strategy was effective, with McDonald's promising to improve the conditions of their factory farms for the sake of the animals. Other chains like Burger King and Wendy's followed suit with their own respective campaigns. But not all of PETA's campaigns were this successful, and in their relentless pursuit of attention, they occasionally crossed lines that even some of their supporters couldn't defend. In 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested for murdering 17 different—
What's up, Osho?
men. The story made national headlines for Dahmer's unspeakable actions, going as far as to abuse his victims both before and after their deaths.
Oh my god, bro.
As well as eating the flesh from their corpses.
Yo!
Not even a month after the arrest, PETA began leaning into the tragedy for their campaign. They published advertisements that looked like they were recounting Dahmer's crimes, victims being dragged away, ignoring as they cried for help, dismembered, and ultimately eaten. Then after walking—
Can you drop a follow? I've been trying to get bigger.
They weren't talking about Jeffrey Dahmer at all. They were talking about cows, pigs, and
Who
chickens,
are you, bro?
and asking people—
like, who the fuck? You're not gonna like say who you are, like give a little like introduction to yourself. Are you just going in the chat after chat and begging for fucking follows like a goddamn bot? Like, dude, come on.
people to become vegetarians. Critics believed it was a major stretch to compare a
Guys, follow for follow.
sadistic serial killer to farming, and that they were capitalizing off a national tragedy for their own personal
You stream
gain.
Siege
They
and COD?
imitated—
Alright, hold on. Let me see your channel. Is your name Gunner? Damn, bro. I thought you were a gunner, bro. Let's see this clip. No! Wait, that was fire, bro. Good kill. Alright, I'll give you a follow for that. That was fucking badass kill. Yo, I play Rainbow, bro. Oh, show. Add me on Ubisoft. Austin PSPDS. Same as my Twitch. Let's play some Rainbow together sometime. Oh, shit. What's up, Regakai? Thanks for the follow, bro.
a similar strategy in 2002 with Robert Pickton, a serial killer who victimized 15 women and stored their remains in the freezer on his personal pig farm. PETA saw these serial killers and factory farmers as one and the same, and anyone who felt remorse for the human victims but not animals, PETA saw them as hypocrites. This strategy became particularly egregious in 2003 with their infamous Holocaust on Your Plate campaign. Funded by an anonymous Jewish donor, PETA placed 8 large signs on city streets depicting animals inside slaughterhouses to the emaciated and tortured prisoners of Nazi-run concentration camps. The Anti-Defamation League, an advocacy group meant to combat anti-Semitism, described the comparison as inappropriate and insensitive. The issue should stand on its own merits, rather than rely on inappropriate comparisons that only serve to trivialize the suffering of 6 million Jews and others who died at the hands of the Nazis. To PETA and its supporters, the campaign was not disrespectful because they believe that animals and humans are equals, so they don't see the difference between humans slaughtering millions of animals every year or humans committing genocide. But most people just don't see the world that way, which doesn't mean that they support animal cruelty.
Yo, Osho, how are you gonna beg me to follow you and you're not even gonna follow me back, bro? That is the most blatant disrespect. I've been waiting for a follow back, dude. I'm never gonna forget that. That's crazy.
Many normal people actually strongly oppose unnecessary suffering and believe animals deserve protection and humane treatment.
Yo, stop being so
yes,
obsessed.
even those who eat meat. At the same time, they still view human life as unique. If forced to choose between saving a person and saving an animal, most would choose the person. It's in our DNA.
Wow, Mo, oh, you're supporting the person that's scamming me? Crazy.
And others who died at the hands of the Nazis. To PETA and its supporters, the campaign was not disrespectful because they believe that animals and humans are equals, so they don't see the difference between humans slaughtering millions of animals every year or humans committing genocide. But most people just don't see the world that way, which doesn't mean that they support animal cruelty. Many normal people actually strongly oppose unnecessary suffering and believe animals deserve protection and humane treatment. Yes, even those who eat meat. At the same time, they still view human life as unique. If forced to choose between saving a person and saving an animal, most would choose the person. It's in our DNA. PETA often treats any distinction between human life and animal life as a form of hatred towards animals. Then again, this type of nuanced discussion doesn't pair well when they are trying to advertise, which is why their relentless oversimplification made it seem like animal cruelty wasn't even the subject of their cause, and that they were just trying to get a rise out of people. Another example of this is their Save the Whales billboard. Rather than discussing actual whales, the billboard depicts an overweight woman with the slogan, "Lose the blubber, go vegetarian." This was not
if he doesn't follow me back, it's just bad karma on his part.
Informative, and to be honest, it's not even motivational. It does nothing more than insult overweight people under the guise of vegetarian activism. But they weren't just offensive. Many felt PETA's behavior crossed the line of being flat out ridiculous. In 2010, an orca living in SeaWorld Orlando named Tilikum made headlines after his handler Dawn Brancho.
Oh my
this
God.
was surprisingly not the first time this had happened. His handler Kelty Byrne in 1991 and Daniel P. Dukes in 1999.
Oh my God, how many times?
Led PETA to file a lawsuit on behalf of Tilikum against SeaWorld. That's right, they filed a civil lawsuit on behalf of an animal. It gets even more ridiculous when you look into their cause for concern. They claim that Tilikum's 13th Amendment rights were being violated, not only implying that the Constitution applies to animals, but also insinuating that SeaWorld was using the killer whale as a literal slave. The Constitution begins with the phrase, "We the people," not "we the orcas," which is why the courts ruled that the Constitution applied specifically to human citizens of the United States, not all living entities within its jurisdiction, and the case was thrown out. Of course, there are genuine concerns to be raised about SeaWorld and other facilities that keep animals in captivity, but this was not an earnest attempt at justice. It was nothing more than one of PETA's publicity stunts. Similar actions have been taken by the organization, which somehow managed to be even more ridiculous. In 2015, they filed another lawsuit, this time on behalf of a monkey named Naruto. In 2011, the primate came across a British photographer named David Slater. Naruto approached one of his cameras fixed on a tripod, stood in front of the lens, and took a selfie of himself with a big smile.
Oh my God, I love this photo! That his name is Naruto?
That because Naruto was the one to take the picture, that the rights to the photograph actually belonged to him. PETA argued that he should be given full copyright ownership, and any money generated from the image would go to PETA directly to ensure the funds were used properly. Of course, the courts did not find any legal standing to award Naruto copyright ownership of his selfie. Situations like this created hilarious newspaper headlines like, "Judge says monkey cannot own copyright to famous selfies." PETA has behaved in a way that makes them look completely delusional, to the point where some have even began to question if PETA is controlled by the opposition, paid for by the meat industry to scare people away from becoming vegetarians. And while this likely isn't the case, it truly just speaks to how poor PETA's reputation has become. And the amount of side quests they go on to promote their cause is just as impressive as it is insane. My mind was blown when I found out about the countless browser games PETA has created. And I'm not talking about educational games for children, I'm talking about full-blown parody games where PETA steals some of the biggest franchises on Earth and turns them into animal rights propaganda.
Super Tofu Boy?
They made a parody of Cooking Mama called Cooking Mama, Mama Animals, where players are forced to rip organs out of a turkey, pluck its feathers, and prepare its carcass before Mama eventually realizes she's evil and becomes a vegan. They made Pokemon Black and Blue, a game where Pikachu, Tepig, and other Pokemon are covered in bruises and broken bones after being abused by their trainers. The entire premise is that Pokemon battles are basically organized animal fighting, and the Pokemon need to overthrow their human captors. One of the more bizarre examples was Dress Up the Trollsons. The organization was upset that Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen wore fur in some of their fashion lines, so they created
Come on,
a
bro.
browser game where the sisters look like
they didn't kill them.
Emaciated zombies, and players dress them up in blood-stained animal clothing. The goal was to publicly shame them into abandoning fur altogether. The PETA game's lore is deep. They've made hundreds, maybe even thousands of these, but none of them hold a candle to the absolute insanity that is when they compared the AKC, the largest purebred dog registry in the United States and the chief promoter of purebred breeding, to the Ku Klux Klan. In this game/quiz, players had to answer loaded questions that were carefully designed to make AKC look like a hate organization for mixed breed dogs. They even ran commercials with the same messaging.
That's a great point, Cindy. And that's why it's important for us to continue to dock the tails, crop the ears, and create that clean look. It's so important. I'm sorry, sir. I think you have the wrong meeting.
Oh, is this the American Kennel Club?
Yes, but we're discussing.
And you believe in the sanctity of pure bloodlines, right?
Yes.
And breeding to achieve a master race?
Well, master pedigree.
It's kind of funny though.
Race pedigree. I mean, that's just all semantics. I think I'm gonna fit right in here.
Their argument here kind of reminds me of like that classic Twitter meme where like on Twitter you'll be like, man, I love waffles, and then people reply, so you hate pancakes? It's like, no, I just prefer waffles. I like them more. I didn't say anything about pancakes. Liking or preferring a purebred dog doesn't mean that you hate mixed breeds. But when PETA isn't creating games of their own, they might be attacking others. And in the case of one popular Japanese game, PETA messed with the wrong community. Umama Sume, Pretty Derby,
what the hell is this
franchise that turns famous real-life racehorses into anime girls called horse girls who race, train, and compete in a fictional sports world. Most of the characters are based on actual champion racehorses from Japanese racing history. The one that became the point of controversy was Silent Suzuka.
This is so weird.
PETA tweeted, if Umama Sume Pretty Derby were honest, your favorite horse girl doesn't get a comeback arc. One failed event and the race is over forever, just like what happened to the real Silent Suzuka. And then they posted an image of one of the characters of the game with an injury with the text that read, in real life, the horse Silent Suzuka suffered a catastrophic injury in a race and was euthanized, which is ironic.
It's the way they did it, bro. It's fucked up and sad, but it's the way that shit was. Everything about it.
Because if the horse was sent to PETA, they would have done the exact same thing.
Yo, facts though!
So, the franchise has actually increased public interest in retired racehorses and their histories, with many fans visiting farms and learning about the animals that inspired the characters.
Okay, that's just fucking weird, man. Why are you sexualizing goddamn horses? Why are you giving horses titties?
Japan's fund for retired racehorses has raised more than $1.8 million over the past 10 years, mostly thanks to fans of the mobile game. Fans legitimately raise money to donate and create memorials for retired racehorses. They have done more to honor and respect horses than PETA ever has. But since the org is vehemently against horse racing and has been for decades, they couldn't see through their own blinders. But the result results were not what they hoped for. Fans absolutely trashed PETA on Twitter as they felt that an activist organization had barged into their community, misunderstood what they loved about it, and then used one of its most iconic characters as a prop for a message that just missed the mark. It was so bad that even the owner of the deceased horse, Silent Suzuka, that PETA tried to defend, quote tweeted the image and said, "Go to hell, you organization." And it's really when people fight back against PETA that makes them look insignificant, like their feud with the family-owned Baltimore restaurant Jimmy's Seafood.
Bro,
in 2018, PETA was targeting the Northeast United States and Canada with their "I'm me, not meat" campaign to protest against the consumption of lobster, which is a staple dish for Northeasterners.
They may not necessarily be able to scream, or we may not be able to recognize.
Why do all PETA people look the fucking same? You could tell their childhoods were just crazy stupid.
That they are
getting bullied and getting fucking stupid.
Like other animals. But they absolutely do.
You need a fucking braces, bro.
They even tweeted this guide of examples of anti-animal idioms commonly used in America and how
feed two birds with one scone. Be the test tube. Feed a fed horse. Bring home the bagels. Well, actually, they do say that in New York, the Jews. Take the flower by the thorn.
Bruh. To rephrase them, such as, instead of "kill two birds with one stone," say "feed two birds with one scone." To which the Jimmy's Seafood Twitter account replied with, instead of saying PETA has killed over 36,000 animals, say PETA has not euthanized 40,000 animals yet. Instead of saying PETA steals pets from homes, say "my bad," and then they link the story of them killing a child's chihuahua. The feud continued in 2019 when PETA put up a billboard encouraging Marylanders to see the individual within crabs and go vegan. Jimmy's then responded with a sign of its own and even created a beer called PETA Tears. PETA fired back again in 2023 with a billboard down the street from the restaurant that had a picture of a fish and text that read, "I never lent you my flesh, go vegan." Because during the 40-day solemn season of preparation for Easter, Catholics and Christians might abstain from eating meat but will eat seafood. In response, Jimmy's put up 2 billboards in front of their restaurant, one that had a crab on it which read, "They died to be enjoyed," and the other with crab cakes that read, "It'd be a sin to waste them."
Damn.
PETA decided that even the Bible needed an animal rights update. The book, PETA's version of the creation story, is an AI-generated vegan interpretation of the book of Genesis from the Bible. The organization even modified famous passages to encourage vegetarianism and portray animals as equals rather than resources for mankind. And whether it was the Bible,
I want
Pokemon,
that book.
Mario, McDonald's, Jeffrey Dahmer, or the Ku Klux Klan, nothing was off limits, which at this point, we have to give them credit for their consistency. Still to this day, activists are literally encasing their feet in cement to get their messages across, so when police officers show up to the scene, they are physically unable to move the protesters. Although I'm not sure how much this is actually working. They haven't had a viral stunt in decades, and I think at this point, the mainstream news only covers the stories out of pity. The most tragic part about PETA's desperation is the fact that they've actually done a lot of good, and to be honest, their existence has probably been a net positive for both animal rights and vegetarianism. In the earliest days of PETA, they were actually well respected and admired. Shortly after PETA was founded in 1980, the group began their first ever campaign, an undercover investigation in an illegal animal testing facility in Silver Spring, Maryland. Alex Pacheco, who co-founded PETA with Newkirk, volunteered at the Institute of Behavioral Research, where he acted as a double agent, collecting as much evidence as he could to build a case. While undercover, he witnessed 17 monkeys being subjected to unspeakable experiments and tests. They were forced to live alone in a small wire cage with no bedding, only being allowed to leave the cage when they were being experimented on. The animals were given special operations to cut off all sensory feedback to their arms and legs before being restrained and perpetually shocked to see if they were still capable of using limbs they couldn't feel. Occasionally, Pacheco would break into the facility at night, while Ingrid Newkirk hid in the back of a car with a walkie-talkie to alert him of any intruders. They eventually gathered enough evidence to bring to the local news station, as well as the authorities, who would soon after raid the compound and shut down the operation.
messed up,
This was
bro.
the first operation of many that PETA would conduct over the 80s, and they would begin to build a reputation as an extremely effective grassroots animal activist group. In 1984, PETA took down a massive horse meat operation. A company called Horses Unlimited brought thousands of horses and sold them to local ranchers in northern Texas. After the ranchers would fatten the horses up, they sold them back to Horses Unlimited, who would then sell their meat overseas to Europe. However, problems arose during
Ew.
a massive winter storm in late 1983, which saw countless horses freeze or starve to death. PETA ultimately exposed this massive operation and was able to stop it before it got worse. PETA was also able to intervene on behalf of a handful of animal experiment operations throughout the late 80s, saving dogs, rabbits, chimpanzees, and more from cruel
What was
and
happening
deadly
to that rabbit, bro?
experiments. This was something everybody could get behind. PETA was building a reliable reputation as animal rights vigilantes, and their efforts were drawing more awareness towards animal cruelty and abuse. Even after they shifted their approach in the 90s and 2000s, leaning into more sensationalism and focusing on pop culture, they still made efforts to inspire change that unfortunately went completely unnoticed. Regardless, there is no turning back for PETA. They have built their empire on controversy, and no amount of good PR will ever be able to change that, which is why many people
Fuck
today
PETA.
look at them less as activists and more like extremists. This is the tragic reality for PETA. They became the most well-known animal rights movement on the planet at the cost of also becoming the most hated. PETA is the perfect example of how a movement founded on empathy can slowly earn a reputation for something much darker, just like Oprah, who appears to be the exact opposite of what people think she is. But check out this
Whoa, that thumbnail's freaking crazy looking, bro. Is that what Oprah looks like without makeup or something? Because if that's true, keep that away from me.